My name is Janelle Brooks, and on the afternoon our family gathered for the monthly Brooks reunion. I walked into the grand entrance of my parents' estate soaked from the rain and trembling with embarrassment. My father stared at me with confusion, his brows lifting the moment he saw the Uber pulling away from the driveway. He asked, "Janelle, why did you arrive in a rideshare car? Did the vehicle I gave you break down?" Before I could even open my mouth, my husband Calvin Rivers answered for me with a smirk that sliced right through the room. He leaned back in his seat as if the world belonged to him and said, "That car belongs to my mother now. She needed it more than Janelle." Every conversation at the long dining table fell silent. The air shifted in a way that made my chest tighten. My father looked at me first, then at Calvin, as if trying to understand the logic behind the insult that had just been laid at his feet. I stood there dripping water onto the marble floor, holding my purse like a shield. I wished I could disappear. Calvin kept chewing his food, as if nothing were wrong, as if stripping me of my birthday gift was a perfectly reasonable decision. But my father William Brooks only nodded slowly. No anger, no raised voice. Just a calm expression that said something powerful was already set in motion. The Brooks estate was alive that afternoon with the kind of luxury people only saw in magazines. It was the monthly family reunion, a tradition my relatives never missed. 3 generations filled the massive home, each person successful in their own field: doctors, attorneys, tech founders, people who built legacies with discipline and integrity. The long driveway outside sparkled with rows of polished cars parked in perfect order. Sleek sedans, towering SUVs, and limited edition models gleamed beneath the shifting clouds. The kind of cars Calvin always dreamed of owning but never earned. He liked to pretend he belonged among them, but everyone in the family knew he was there only because my father gave him a position at the company. Inside the main hall, laughter and warm greetings traveled through the air. A catering team moved between tables serving dishes that had been prepared by one of the best culinary companies in the city. My aunts wore tailored dresses, my uncles wore suits, even the teenagers arrived looking effortlessly put together. And then there was me stepping into the room, still damp from the rain, with the faint smell of the outside storm clinging to my clothes. I felt every pair of eyes turning toward me for a moment. Their smiles softened out of concern. No one said anything, but they noticed. Calvin, on the other hand, remained seated at the head table beside my father. He did not stand. He did not offer a hand. He did not even glance my way. He adjusted his expensive watch, the one bought with my supplementary card, and laughed too loudly at a joke my cousin made, trying to appear important in a room where he had never truly belonged. As I walked closer to the table, the weight of the moment pressed harder against my chest. Calvin finally looked up, but not with concern or warmth. Instead, he flashed the same smug grin he used whenever he wanted to feel superior. He sat comfortably in the carved wooden chair my father usually used for honored guests and cut into his steak, as if nothing in the world required his attention. My father cleared his throat. It was a quiet sound, but in a family like ours it carried authority. Everyone at the table paused. He asked again, gently this time, "Janelle, why did you not drive the Mercedes I sent you last week? Was there an issue with the vehicle?" Before I could answer, Calvin raised his hand slightly as if swatting away a fly. With his mouth half full, he said, "There is no issue, sir. I gave the car to my mother. She needs it more. Janelle is fine with an Uber. It is more practical for her anyway." The room stiffened. Several relatives exchanged glances, trying to process what they had just heard. Calvin continued, speaking proudly as if he had made the most responsible decision in the world. He added that his mother deserved something luxurious so her church friends would not look down on her. Then he said I should live modestly because I only went to work and did not dress up often. My face burned with humiliation. I wanted to disappear into the floor. I had never once complained about working quietly behind the scenes or about being simple. Yet here my husband was using my humility as an excuse to strip me of a gift given from my father heart to daughter heart. My father remained seated, his expression calm and unreadable, but I knew him well. That calm was not peace, it was preparation. Across town at that same moment, Calvin's mother Marla Rivers was living her best fantasy. She stood proudly in front of the upscale Lakeside Galleria Mall where the wealthiest families like to shop. The black Mercedes class sat parked at an angle near the entrance so everyone walking by would notice it. Marla kept patting the hood as if it were a trophy she had earned herself. She wore a bright floral dress that clashed with her oversized jewelry. Her purse was a loud imitation designer piece with gold charms, jangling at every step. A small group of women from her church circle gathered around her. Some appeared impressed. Others hid their amusement behind polite smiles. Everyone knew Marla loved attention. With her voice loud enough for people across the valet area to hear, Marla bragged that her son had purchased the car outright. No financing, cash. She even tapped on the leather seats and said she deserved luxury because she had raised such a successful man. She did not mention my name at all. Then she got into the driver's seat, eager to continue her show. She pressed the start button, expecting the satisfying purr of the engine. Instead, a sharp blaring alarm rang out. The dashboard lights flashed red. A robotic voice repeated, "Unauthorized user detected. Vehicle locked by administrator." Marla froze. She pressed the button again, and again. Then harder. Nothing worked. The horn began to blast in timed intervals. People at the mall entrance stopped to stare. Some took out their phones to record. Marla screamed for help. Her makeup began to smear as sweat and panic mixed on her face. She tried pulling the door handle, but it refused to open. She was locked inside the very car she had been bragging about just minutes earlier. Then a bright orange tow truck with the Brooks Corporation logo pulled into view. 2 security agents stepped out, calm and focused. For Marla Rivers, the performance was finally over. Back at the Brooks estate, dessert had just been served when Calvin's phone vibrated on the table. The loud ringtone shattered the quiet conversation around us. He picked it up without hesitation. His expression relaxed at first, assuming his mother was calling to celebrate her little show at the mall. But the moment he heard her voice, his smile collapsed. Marla was screaming hysterically. Her words tumbled over each other. She shouted that men had taken the car, that she had been humiliated in front of the entire mall, that she had been trapped and dragged out, and that everyone had recorded her. Even from my seat I could hear the panic through the phone. Calvin's face turned red, then pale, then red again. Instead of thinking for a moment, instead of asking me gently, instead of considering his own actions, he exploded. He slammed his spoon onto the plate and shot up from his chair. The sound echoed across the hall. Dozens of relatives turned to stare. Calvin pointed at me and shouted that I had sabotaged his mother. He accused me of being ungrateful and vindictive. His voice cracked with anger and embarrassment. Before I could defend myself, my father stood. William Brooks did not raise his voice. He simply lifted one hand slowly. Calvin went silent immediately, as if someone had pressed a mute button. My father walked around the table with measured steps. When he reached Calvin, he said calmly that there was no problem with the car. The problem was the user. Then, in the same even tone, he informed Calvin that effective at 5 o'clock that afternoon his position at Brooks Corporation had been terminated for ethical violations. Next, my father extended his hand and said, "The keys, please." Calvin hesitated only a second, but in a room full of people who built their lives on integrity, that hesitation felt like a lifetime. My father remained still, his hand extended, his eyes steady and unblinking. Under the pressure of dozens of silent witnesses, Calvin reached into his pocket and placed the company keys into my father's palm. What happened next stripped the last bit of pride from him. My father pulled a folded $50 bill from his wallet and slipped it into Calvin's shirt pocket. His voice stayed calm as he said, "Use this for a cab. Uber is too expensive. You told Janelle that yourself." A ripple of quiet shock moved through the room. My father nodded toward the security team stationed discreetly near the wall. 2 men stepped forward. They did not touch Calvin. They simply walked beside him, creating a path that led straight out of the double doors. The sky had darkened while we sat at dinner. As the doors opened, rain swept inside, carried by a cold gust of wind. Calvin stepped out into the storm without an umbrella, without a car, without a job. The security team watched until he crossed the threshold of the property, then closed the gates behind him. He tried calling a rideshare, but the app showed no drivers allowed inside the gated community without clearance. His number had already been blocked at the security booth, so he started walking. His shoes splashed through muddy puddles, rain clung to his shirt, weighing it down. Cars passed by, their headlights flashing across his soaked face, but none slowed. By the time he reached the main road, he was shivering from cold and humiliation. For the very first time in his life, he understood how quickly comfort could vanish when it was built on borrowed privilege. The days that followed were a slow unraveling of everything Calvin once believed he controlled. When I finally told him I had filed for divorce, he reacted with disbelief first, then anger, then a strange kind of confidence that made my stomach twist. He claimed the court would never allow me to leave without giving him his share. He said he deserved half of everything, because he had been my husband. He spoke as if marriage had been an investment he was ready to cash out. With the last few dollars he had left from his checking account, he hired a bargain lawyer whose office sat between a payday loan shop and a pawn store. Calvin walked into the courtroom convinced he would walk out a millionaire. When the hearing began, Calvin's lawyer demanded a division of marital assets. He described Calvin as a dutiful husband who had supported me emotionally and helped manage my family business. Calvin even forced out a few tears, claiming he had been thrown into the street without a cent. Then my attorney stood. He calmly placed a thick folder on the desk. Inside were 3 years of financial records, bank statements, credit card bills, transfer receipts, everything. He explained with complete clarity that Calvin had not contributed a single dollar to our household. Not one. Instead, he had used my supplementary cards for personal expenses, for his mother, for home renovations in her name, for trips, and for luxury items. Over $300,000 in total. Calvin choked on his own breath. His mother Marla sat behind him, clutching her purse so tightly the handles bent. My attorney stated that all those expenses were unauthorized and classified as debt owed back to me. Then he submitted a counterclaim requesting compensation and seizure of any assets purchased with those funds, including the small house Marla had recently boasted about paying off. The courtroom went silent. The judge reviewed the documents, then delivered the decision with unmistakable firmness. Divorce granted, Calvin's claims denied, restitution required, asset seizure approved. Marla fainted. Calvin stared straight ahead as if someone had drained the color from his world. His dream of fortune had ended with the slam of a gavel. After the court ruling, everything collapsed even faster than Calvin and Marla expected. The house Marla had bragged about was seized within weeks. Notices were taped to the door. Neighbors watched as officials removed furniture and boxed up belongings. Marla screamed and begged, but there was nothing left to negotiate. Everything had been purchased with money taken from me. Their rental apartment in the city was next. Without my payments and with no income between them, they fell behind on rent almost immediately. The landlord gave them 2 warnings, then kicked them out. Marla cried the entire time, blaming everyone but herself. They ended up in a cramped unit at the edge of a rundown neighborhood. The air smelled of mold and sewage. The roof leaked. The mattress was thin. Rats moved in the walls at night. The glamour Marla had once obsessed over was replaced by a daily fight for basic survival. Marla tried working as a washerwoman for families in the complex, but her hands blistered and cracked from detergent. She complained constantly and customers eventually stopped calling. Calvin fared no better. Every corporate job he applied for rejected him. Some refused to interview him. His name had traveled through the industry. Nobody wanted the man who had been fired by William Brooks for ethical misconduct. He tried smaller businesses, but the answer was always the same: no trust, no position, no opportunity. Desperation pushed him into night shifts unloading trucks at the produce market. The work was brutal. Heavy sacks cut into his shoulders, his feet ached, his skin darkened from long hours under harsh lights. When that job became too difficult, he took a part-time position as an unlicensed valet, waving cars into tight spaces for a few crumpled dollars a day. The fall from grace was complete, and it was only the beginning. While Calvin and Marla sank deeper into the life they had created for themselves, my world slowly began to bloom again. For the first time in years, I woke up without a knot in my chest. I no longer walked on eggshells. I no longer had to apologize for things I did not do. My days were quieter, but they were mine. With my father's blessing and my own savings, I restarted a dream I had once buried. I opened a small fashion boutique, something I had always wanted but never felt confident enough to pursue. At first the shop was modest, a corner space with bright windows and simple displays. But women came in, drawn not just to the clothes but to the atmosphere. I treated each customer with warmth and honesty, something Calvin had once mocked me for. Word spread. Within a year the boutique expanded. Then a second location. Then a third. By the time the 5th store opened, my name appeared in local business magazines as one of the rising female entrepreneurs of the region. I worked long hours, but it was a labor of love, not obligation. My father often visited. He never made me feel like my success was owed to him. Instead, he encouraged my ideas and celebrated every milestone with genuine pride. The sparkle in his eyes whenever he looked at me was something I had missed for too long. One afternoon he invited me to lunch at one of the best restaurants downtown. I arrived wearing a navy dress and a soft silk scarf. When I walked through the door, I felt something I had not felt in years. Confidence. Peace. A sense that I had rebuilt my life from the ground up and was finally standing on solid earth again. The restaurant my father chose sat on the corner of the busiest street downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows lined the front wall, giving diners a clear view of the city outside. My father and I sat near one of those windows, enjoying lunch and talking about the newest boutique location. It felt like a new chapter one never imagined reaching. As we talked, a commotion outside caught my eye. A driver in a luxury sedan was yelling at an unlicensed valet, accusing him of letting a motorcycle scrape his car. The valet bowed, repeatedly apologizing, his voice trembling. His clothes hung loosely on his thin frame, and his skin looked worn from hours under the sun. Then he lifted his head. It was Calvin. His eyes were hollow, his hair unkempt, his posture bent from exhaustion. The man who once bragged about status and comfort was now shuffling on hot pavement, begging strangers not to report him. I stared for a moment, unable to look away. Across the street on a small stool near a vending cart sat Marla. She was selling $1 tissue packs to passers-by. Her clothes were faded. Her face looked older than her years. She pressed her hand to her mouth the moment she recognized me. Calvin turned his head toward the restaurant. Through the glass he saw me sitting beside my father laughing over dessert. His expression froze. Shame and regret spread across his face like a slow burning fire. He took a small step toward the window as if wanting to speak, but he did not get far. I held his gaze for a few seconds. There was no anger left in me, no bitterness, just a quiet understanding that some doors were not meant to reopen. I turned back to my father and said, "Could you ask the waiter to lower the blinds? The sunlight is a little too bright." The golden blinds slid down gently, separating our worlds for the final time. A few months later, on a humid morning, Calvin sat in a tiny corner coffee shop near the Produce Market where he now worked night shifts. The place was dim, furnished with old plastic chairs and a small television mounted crookedly in the corner. He stirred a cup of watered-down coffee, his shoulders slumped, his clothes wrinkled and smelling faintly of onions from the market stalls. The television volume suddenly rose as the shop owner flipped the channel to the morning news. A segment titled "Inspiring Women in Business" lit up the screen. Calvin barely glanced at first. Then he froze. It was me. The camera showed me standing in the courtyard of a beautiful new home surrounded by blooming roses. I was being interviewed about expanding my boutiques internationally. Beside me stood my husband, a calm, kind-faced architect named Daniel Hayes. He held our toddler gently in his arms while smiling in my direction with the type of warmth Calvin had never offered. During the interview, I spoke softly about rebuilding my life, about finding peace, and about creating a foundation to support women facing abandonment and financial manipulation. My name appeared across the screen in bold letters. Calvin stared at the television as if the world had tilted, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and pain. I did not mention him, not once. In my story, he simply did not exist anymore. He watched until the segment faded, leaving him alone with a lukewarm coffee and the weight of everything he had thrown away. In the end, Calvin did not lose because life was unfair. He lost because he mistook kindness for weakness and privilege for entitlement. He had been handed a life many people could only dream of, yet he treated it as if it were owed to him. When everything collapsed, he finally saw the truth. Comfort built on someone else's sacrifice cannot last. As for me, I learned that peace begins the moment you choose yourself over the people who keep breaking you. Healing does not happen all at once. It happens quietly, through small, brave decisions, through choosing dignity, through trusting that you deserve better. If this story resonates with you, take a moment to like the video and share it with someone who may need this reminder today. And before you go, tell me in the comments which city you are watching from. Your support means more than you know, and it helps this channel continue bringing real-life stories to light. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next story.